Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What's happening, guys? Hope everyone is safe and well. Thank you for checking out our review. For this one, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from London Quintet. This is Endless. The band's first full-length album, Formations of a World Below, will be released on August 14th via Endless Records. So, Duncan, I will be the first to put my hand up and say, I've never heard of This Is Endless.
I hadn't either. I also feel that this is slightly false advertising because the album did in fact end. So that's about as good as the humour's going to get, because there's really not a lot to laugh about on this release. It is intense as fuck.
Pretty intense. They have been on the go for about 4 years, 2016. And up until now, up until this point, they've put out an EP back in 2016 called Inherit the Sin. But you may be surprised to hear that this band are actually made up of members of other UK bands.
That would not surprise me. It's
Excellent.
a very incestuous little scene, so I like it when they all Voltron up. It's nice.
Okay, I'll keep trying to surprise you. The bands in question are Ted Maul, Dripback, Dead Beyond Buried, and Onslaught. Now, I haven't heard Dead Beyond Buried, but the other three I have heard. We actually interviewed Dripback in 2014 at King Tut's when they toured with Crowbar.
Oh yeah. I was getting confused there because I was then trying to think about who we interviewed at Tut's, and I was like, the Sword. They toured with the Sword. That doesn't sound right. No, that's right. Yes. It was so long ago, but it's all coming back. I've realised that in previous reviews, Dave, people have cottoned on to the fact that they love my dulcet singing tones. So I'm going to try and segue them in there as much as possible. That one, a little bit of Streisand, just for the listeners out there. Much like This Is Endless, I can see the comparisons.
Dripback. That was, from what I remember, a pretty fun interview. They were pretty hungover, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
you will be if you tour with Crowbar.
Yeah,
I imagine like Jack Daniel's stocks went through the fucking roof that tour. You know what I mean?
I think it was the last day of the tour as well, so they were just like so pissed off with everything. They were looking forward to playing, but they were just like, took the piss out of it yesterday. Absolutely fucked. But yeah, the cool guys.
So there's some of them in this.
I don't know. There's guys from Dripback in this. I don't know if it was the two guys we interviewed or if it's others. I'm not entirely sure.
Dave, it's the two guys we interviewed.
It's the two guys.
No one's fact checking 2014. So
I will edit that out. I won't really. But if you recognise any of those bands that I've mentioned, you'll know most of them come with or come from a kind of death metal-ish background, except Onslaught, who maybe lean more into the kind of thrash side of things. I say ish because although most of the bands have a kind of death metal sound at their core, it definitely wasn't the only style that they were known for. You could throw in some hardcore, some grindcore, some punk, a bit of straight up metal in there as well. And when you listen to This Is Endless,
you've just ticked the entire box off. How Duncan would describe this band.
Their sound starts to make a bit of sense.
Yeah, because I'll give them credit on this. They effortlessly blend those influences into a sound that makes it sound like that's just how that should be played.
Yeah, definitely. But it almost has like a slightly more modern streak to it as well.
I got there was waves of, and you're going to have to put your way back cap on.
Oh shit.
Right. There's waves of kind of later day Agony scene in here. Specifically on the vocals. There was certain, the vocalist has the fucking tone that I love. like from like really aggressive kind of hardcore inspired like death metal singing. So there's a really powerful kind of mid-range growl about it, but will easily happily just hit some fucking like ear-piercing screeches as if, you know, it's absolutely sweet fuck all. Which is very much in the reins of the dude from the Agony scene. So when I was listening to, it was one of the first things that caught me. It was like this has got a kind of almost like a really aggressive hardcore punk thing, and then out of nowhere the guitars just like started hammering me in the face with a bit of kind of thrash death metal. I was like, oh, what the fuck is going on here? Interestingly enough, if you'd asked me, you'd put me on the spot, I would not have thought they were a British band. I think they have a very American sound about them.
I disagree.
Oh, Dave, well, fuck you.
I disagree. I felt it was very British sounding, but I'll come on to that in a second.
Nice.
What I really liked about this band is, although they kind of dabble in various styles.
People did not see the air quotation marks, Dave. That does not transfer in an audio format.
Sorry, I keep forgetting. They don't necessarily play their full hand on the first track. Kind of like Razor Sharp Death Blizzard, the album we reviewed not long ago. You know, they don't play all their sounds to begin with. Their sound kind of augments as the album progresses, and I think because of that, it's an album that really keeps you engaged and interested in about like what's about to come next. Unsurprisingly, from the get-go, you'll hear elements of their kind of previous bands kind of bleeding into the sound. Particularly the kind of up-tempo, almost kind of grind elements of Dripback, but they also have this kind of more like direct, kind of blunt force trauma approach, which kind of puts me in mind of Ted Maul a little, but also like Morbid Angel, Napalm Death, Nailbomb, even Animosity. Also, actually remind me a little of bands like Xibalba as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they kind of weave between that kind of like death metal, hardcore, but they also have this like monstrous side that just could kind of lay waste at any kind of given moment. I mentioned Napalm Death a second ago, and that's probably a good segue into the fact that
I think you're going to look at our new segment, Spot the Napalm Death Riff. It's like, I've not signed up for this.
What I was going to say was, this album was recorded by a guy called Russ Russell, who is pretty infamous in the metal world, as he's worked with some of the kind of biggest bands in the genre, including Napalm Death, but also bands like At the Gates, Lock Up, The Exploited, The Haunted, to kind of name a few, and he's done a fantastic job on Formations of the World Below. It's tonally very dark and visceral, and for some reason that kind of gave me a kind of British feel about it. For some reason, I just kind of had that feeling off it straight away from that kind of tone. But the kind of balance of the mix is really spot on.
See, interestingly, I got, and I hear what you're saying. I think it's the riffing, it's the guitar work that for some reason evokes like a kind of. It was like when you were mentioning like bands like Nailbomb and stuff like that. It kind of reminded me of more of that side of things, and that's where I was leaning towards with that. Really interesting you mentioned in terms of there is a kind of, weirdly enough, of all there's like a really heavy thrash sort of production overall, if you know what I mean. More in that way, but when you mentioned like At the Gates, that like a wee flag just went up that you couldn't see behind me. The At the Gates flag, which is our second segment we're bringing in. Of how like the first time I heard like At the Gates, I'd like, to me, one of the big things that always stood out for them is the production on a couple of those releases, just fucking the tits, man, honestly. And I can definitely now liken that back to this as well. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
I mean, you obviously don't know the metric on how much I actually loved the drum sound on this one, but I'll tell you, I did love the drum sound on this one. Now I know that at times you like your drums a bit dirty, dirty sound, but other times you like them technically proficient. What do you make of the drum production in this? Because the bass drum pedal sounded fucking amazing.
Yeah, I loved the production right across the board, to be honest. Russ Russell does some amazing production jobs, and he's done some fantastic stuff over the years. And I think he absolutely nailed it on this. Like tracks like Insect or even Into the Hive, they sound huge, and the riffs are just like punchy as hell. Especially that last riff on Into the Hive, which has just got this kind of brutal kind of dissonance about it. But the production, it never sounds like messy either.
No.
And at like 30 odd minutes long, this is an album it's very easy to fire on like 3 or 4 times and not get bored of it. And I actually felt that the album kind of got better as it went on, as they started to kind of bring in different ideas and styles, and not just like musically either vocally. It's got a real kind of selection of different textures, from like the kind of gutturals, as you mentioned, the kind of screams, almost like there's some kind of shouty, more kind of hardcore style vocals in there. And even there's a little hint of Kurt Weinstein. A wee bit of his kind of melody on Skin Cyst. I think it's the first track on the album.
Yeah.
Picked just a little bit of that as well. So I thought it was really cool that it had all these kind of interesting textures in it. Quite a satisfying album to listen to, both kind of musically and vocally.
I mean, Skin Cyst for me, I would contest is maybe the weakest song on the album. To me, it got like infinitely more interesting as it went along, and that is not to take a swipe at it. I think it is a great opener, and you know, a really well put together song. It's all the. I think you're probably right. Like the album then goes out its way after Skin Cyst to keep things mixing up and the elements that they bring in. Specifically, like Skin Cyst has at times a really kind of punky vibe to it. But after that, you like the songs that follow, Insect and Creature of Habit, you start to get like complete changes into the elements of a bit of the kind of hardcore thrash. Certainly vocally, it gets really, really, really aggressive in parts in a way which once I can see when I'm seeing things like that, there is more a kind of, I equate kind of London hardcore to being, very, very like super, like there's something very shouty about American hardcore. There's something very like screamy about British hardcore, if you know what I mean. If that makes any fucking sense. So from that capacity, it's definitely more on that side. But what kind of caught me about this particularly, and we spoke about this just before I hit record, the format that the tracks were sent through. Now I could have, right, I'm just gonna put my cards on the table here. I could have changed them to MP3. There are many ways to do that, but they came through as .wav files, which like instantly makes me think old school, because like if you were like me and I think the statute of limitations for piracy on albums from 2001 is passed, and you were using things like LimeWire to download like illegally music, it always came down as WAV. So like I didn't convert it to MP3, so I couldn't listen to it in iTunes, so I couldn't put it over and put it on my phone or whatever. So I've listened to this album approximately 2.5 times. And the times I have been on this computer that we are recording on right now, and it's been whilst I have been like editing other stuff or working on other bits and bobs. I've shoved this on in the background, and it is one of those ones that when you kind of almost look up to think that, did I hit pause or something, because the album's over. It really, really does fly in, and I don't mean that as they're shortchanging you. There's 9 songs on here, it's over 30 minutes long, but it has such a pace to it, and a satisfying pace to it. Nothing at any part was like, song's still going on. It just gets through it, gets it done. Every song feels like there's just the adequate time about how long they've spent playing a riff before they change. Like nothing's laboured here. Like at no point do I feel like, oh well, you're just going back to that riff because you want to do another. It was like the format itself is just really concise, punchy, and very, very easy to listen to, considering it's a very aggressive album. It's just like super. This is the sort of thing that you could put on if you were doing a workout. You could shove this on, This is your 30 minutes cardio for sure, and trust me, you will probably bench more than you've benched before. It's like really, 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 really good. I had a ball with this one. I thought it was excellent. So
yeah, I think even whilst it's like it is very aggressive and extreme in a lot of ways, it also has this kind of groovier side that's quite infectious, where they kind of blend that. It's almost like 90s death metal with a kind of modern groove to give you a, it almost had like certain times like a kind of decapitated type end result. There was parts of a track called Imprinted in Life, which I think is track 7.
Yep.
It put me in mind of a kind of Nihility era Decapitated, but it's fused with these kind of like quite thick hardcore riffs that add so much like authority to the track. It's really cool. A lot of different styles and influences go on in this album, and for that reason it's really interesting to listen to. I think this band have got a ton of potential, and for a first full-length album, it's very solid indeed, and I'm really eager to hear where this band go next. It's also something that I'd quite like to see live.
Oh, I think need Slay live. I think like this to me, like even when you're listening to like some of those monster riffs kicking, you just know that if you heard that in Tuts, for example, your face is going to be fucking melted. You know what I mean? Listening to it, it has that kind of, I want to hear this in a really small, intimate environment, played loud as fuck. And not that there's any truth to this at all, but back in 2014 when we interviewed the dudes from Dripback, we told them, leave this band and form a band called This Is Endless, and release an album called Formations of a World Below, and me and Dave will probably rate it quite highly. Now all of that is a lie, but wouldn't it be so much cooler if it was true? So.
Yeah, and I'm thinking we start a petition, This Is Endless at King Tuts. 2021 would do as well.
Well, I think the way things are going in the world, it'll be 2021, Dave.
Okay, I mean, I can live with that. Yeah, that would be cool though. I'm sure it would be carnage. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, they're definitely a band that sound great on the album, but I think will sound even better live. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's get down to it then, Duncan. It's rating time on this album. I am going to put this album in a 4 out of 5.
Well, you're laughing because I just wanted to prove that we don't copy each other. Before you said anything, and see in the camera, I actually put up how many fingers I'm giving this, and it's a 4. So yeah, I'm the same as you. Like, super easy to listen to, nice, varied, mixed, challenging at times, and so incredibly pissed off. So, what more can you want?
Nothing really. No. If you fancy a bit of This Is Endless, this album will drop on August 14th. It's called Formations of a World Below. And if you want to check out the band in the meantime, they're on Facebook, facebook.com/This Is Endless. Easy as that. That's the review, guys. Thank you so much for checking it out. And till next time, take care. We'll speak to you soon.
See you later.